I'm going to show how I would plan a flight on ozrunways using the Android version. This is running on a S6 Lite 2020 model, which is by no means a fast tablet, and it doesn't need to be because it's quite a light program. And it runs quite well up here in Darwin on this tablet. It doesn't overheat in the sun, and battery lasts for ages. It's been a good bit of kit. I've recently upgraded to an iPad 10, and the advantages that come with the other software aren't always needed. They're a bit overkill, really, for the type of flying you'd do where you'd need an iPad. I feel that by the time you need all those features, they'll be included in your aircraft with the instruments, and you probably end up leaving the iPad in your flight bag. So first I'll go through the basic features, and then I'll plan a quick flight and show how I do my workflow before heading out using this version of ozrunways. So the reason you might use one of these is because they're cheaper, or you might already have one. If you are going to buy a device from scratch and you don't already have one, I would just go to the iPad because there are so many other features that come with it. But if you've already got a cellular powered Android device, or you're just using your phone, this is great. It works pretty well, and you can pretty much do everything. I've done IFR, night IFR, all sorts of things with this, and it's been everything that I need. So looking at the front panel here, starting at the top left, you can see all of these icons that you can turn on and off on the map overlay. And the reason you might want to turn them off is just to declutter. Some of them are IFR waypoints, so if you're flying VFR, you won't need them. And if you have any reason to forget what they are, on the right side there's a question mark, which I'll tap. This is the legend, and it shows you pretty much what everything does. The other settings up the top right here are your basic navigation plan settings. I'll just leave it like that and find it works pretty well. Above that, you've got your crosshairs. I don't know why you need that. You can lock the screen. I've had to do that a couple of times where my headset cable kept moving the screen around as it brushed across the top. The button above that drops your user waypoint. You can see I've accidentally dropped one there from previously. Moving just across to the left, these details are associated with your flight plan submission and also what other people would see you on the map. You can see someone there's moving around there called unknown because they have not filled out this section here. To the left of that is your flight timer, which I've got to set off as soon as I go 10 knots or faster whilst I've got this program running. Down on the bottom left, you can change north up or position up. I find north up works well, especially once you start doing approach plates and things. You don't want to be getting out of spatial awareness because your map's spinning around. Another important thing to turn on, usually, especially in the wet season up here, is the weather overlay on the left. You can see those red squares disappearing as it loads the weather data. There's nothing above us right now. Every time you zoom in and out, it will reload. So you have to make sure that when you're leaving reception, you don't zoom in and out. It's the same with the Apple version. Next, down the bottom here, you can see we're on the maps section. The next one across is airfields, which brings up a giant list of airfields. But if we were to view an airfield, I'll view my local airfield, MKT here. Then it's automatically put us in the airfields tab down the bottom here. If I go back to the map to see where we are, and then want to quickly view MKT again, it will be just as I left it, which is pretty handy. Across to the right, we've got documents, and you've got all your AIPs and everything like that here, just as you have on the iPad version. And it is, once you get used to it, pretty quick to move through them if you need. We've got our smart brief here, which I'll get to in a minute. And then finally, you've got your settings. Again, much stripped back version compared to the iPad, but just enough to get you going. So I'll plan a quick flight now and show how I do my workflow before I take off. For our position, I usually start by tapping and adding to plan for our beginning. And let's say we'd be going across to Jabiru. You can tap and add to plan, and it's created our leg there. Another way, down the bottom right here, is you can type in YMKT, tap on that, and just as we did, add to plan. Or you can create a quick plan, which if I clear all of this, we can type just the codes without a space, with a space between, YMKT space Y, I think it's JOB, and start, which is pretty quick to do. The next thing I'd like to know is the weather, which will determine my altitude. So that's when we start using the brief section. There are two main pages on this which I'd use. This one here, which is the equivalent of a GAF, but ozrunways uses the smart brief, which is just a tidier version of the general area forecast. Up the top here, you can see that we're in that validity period, and as we move across to the next amount of time, it will show the next validity period and the changes included. For the area that we're working in, you tap anywhere in it, and you can see we are in area A, and it shows the associated weather in that area. I look for any kind of red flags with the weather, any altitudes to avoid, or even any areas that I need to go around. If there's nothing to worry about, I then move down to my winds, which is an extract from the grid point wind temperature. And down the bottom right here, you can move the slider up and down to change the altitude for the sampled winds that is forecast. So for our area here, it also shows temperature by color. I can see that it would be worth trying to get high up to 14,000 feet. You have a lot less of a headwind, or coming down lower, really low, you would have a lot less of a headwind as well, but you'd probably get smashed by thermals and mechanical turbulence. So you have to start just seeing what it's like out there and going with that. Once you've chosen your height, let's say I were to choose 4,500 for a VFR route tracking east. You then go back to your maps and bring up your sheet, which is down the bottom right here. You can see our leg. This is just like when you do flight planning at your flight school, but digital version. You would enter your height here, 4,500, and then tap your wind prediction. Let's say we're going to take off in 1 hour. You don't need to get the whiz wheel out or anything. It does it all for you. As long as you've got your aircraft's details set up in the settings there and you've selected your aircraft, then it will just work everything out for you. So you can see here, our aircraft set to TAS at 105 knots, track's 89, but our heading's 90, so it's worked out around that wind. It's also given us our ETI, 68 minutes. Now, this does not include time for climb, I believe. So you need to add that in, whether you do a minute every 2,000 feet or whatever your SOPs or whatever you've worked out works for your aircraft. And then, of course, for fuel-wise, you have to add your 30 minutes if you're Part 91 private, or 45 minutes with your 10% if you're 135 charter. And pretty quickly, even off the top of your head, you don't need a calculator. That's your fuel plan done. Just make sure you write it down so if you get ramp checked, you're not backed up against the wall here. So there are a few other features. For example, if I wanted to get the forecast, I would tap on the aerodrome that I'd like to get the forecast for and hit this quick brief button. That brings up, just like your NAPES submission, it's got your TAF and also your NOTAMs further down. And you've obviously got to have a flick through that before you depart. We can also bring up more information on this airport. If we tap on the plate that is for Jabiru, you can see we can bring up some documents for it. On the iPad version, the documents are all within this square here with the coloured charts. But for us, we hit documents, and you can see I was already looking at a chart here. We can hit the folder button up the top, and it shows you your different aerodrome charts for, say, this R&P or even just the aerodrome chart. And the handy thing is we can slide left and right between these, which I don't think you can do on the iPad, or I haven't learned how to do yet anyway. Another thing we can do that the iPad can't do is at the top right here, we can hit this map picture with a plus on it, and that overlays the plate over the terrain, and it's to scale as well. So if I were to, say, turn on the GPS waypoints, you can see they line up perfectly with the plates, which is actually a very handy feature. Up the top left, you can change the opacity of that plate, and you can clear it up the top right. Going back to that page we had before, which is in the airfields page, you can see up the top here, we can apply this chart to our quick sort of bar up the top. And you can see I was doing some work at Bathurst here, and I've just added Jabiru to the right there. So if you're doing it back and forth pretty often, you can just put the charts up there and you can access them very quickly without having to zoom in on that. To file a flight plan using ozrunways, you can do that. Bring up the flight plan. Feature worth mentioning is the dark modes. So by going to settings, I've skipped ahead of here, but in preferences beyond settings, you can change the theme from light to dark, which just changes most of your background, and it'll also change your icon background colors. But you can go a step further and turn on dark mode filter up the top here, which then is great for nighttime. And in fact, your approach plates are also in dark mode, which is fantastic for night flying. One feature that they don't have, and I wish they did, which the iPad version has, is the fuel costs at different browsers. And the other feature I wish they had was public notes, because a lot of the gate codes, up the top end here at least, are listed on ozrunways public notes, which I've only seen accessible on the iOS Apple version. Otherwise, it's been great for the top end. It's been good, and I'm going to be giving this to my dad so he can enjoy it. It's worth mentioning here, the ozrunways version of Android doesn't include weight and balance, but it's not an issue because there is a weight and balance app on the Play Store, and it's fantastic. It's super simple. You can change all of the edges of the envelope to suit your aircraft. And here I've got an aircraft which we get around in sometimes, TTF. I'll give you an example. We might bring this slider across to represent two pilots in the front, full tanks, maybe 130 kilos of luggage in the rear, another 130, and it shows just how much you can fit in there before you go out of balance or over max takeoff weight. And then you can see as you burn your fuel across there where your CG is moving. It's really handy to play around with, understand your aircraft, really simple. And there are a few good presets in there if you're just flying around in something like an Archer or a Cherokee or a Cessna 172. It's got all the presets in there, and you just fill in your aircraft's empty weights and empty center of gravity. So fantastic. I really recommend this. You can make your own knee board for any tablet really, by getting these clear silicone covers just off eBay, and then using Gorilla Tape or some kind of two-way tape on the back of one of the ASA branded or any brand of clipboard. You just glue it to that and it works fantastic, instead of buying the proprietary mounts which might not even exist for certain Android versions. Give it a go.